The moment I stepped back into the house, it hit me. That familiar, comforting wave of home. It's a feeling I hadn't realized I missed so much until I was standing right there in the entryway of our suburban Chicago home. 3 years. 3 years I'd spent chasing deadlines and exploring cobblestone streets as a software engineer in Europe. It had been an incredible experience, one I wouldn't trade for anything. But there was a part of me, a deep-rooted part, that had always longed for this. The scent of Mom's cooking, lasagna, my absolute favorite, filled the air, and a genuine smile stretched across my face. My parents were, as expected, ecstatic to see me. Hugs were exchanged, stories were shared over dinner, and we spent the first evening catching up on everything that had happened in our lives since I'd last been home. There was laughter, a few tears from Mom, and that easygoing familiarity that only comes with family. It was wonderful, truly. But beneath the surface of all the warmth and welcome, I couldn't shake this subtle feeling that things had shifted while I was away. Not in a bad way, just different. The biggest difference, by far, was my younger brother, Lucas. When I left for Europe, he was this lanky 15-year-old, all awkward angles and a mop of unruly hair, more interested in video games than anything else. He barely reached my shoulder back then. Now, as he came bounding down the stairs to greet me, I almost didn't recognize him. He was 18, a young man with broad shoulders that hinted at his high school football days, and a confident, easygoing air about him that was completely new. He was taller than me now, which felt incredibly strange. "Avery?" he exclaimed, his voice deeper than I remembered, and a genuine smile lit up his face. He gave me a hug that was less the quick, brotherly squeeze I was used to, and more of a solid, grown-up embrace. "Wow, it's so good to see you." "You too, Luke," I replied, still a little taken aback by the transformation. "Look at you. You've gotten so big." I ruffled his now neatly styled hair, a habit from years ago that felt a little out of place now. He just chuckled, a low, mature sound that was also new to me. Throughout the evening I found myself subtly observing him, the way he carried himself, the easy banter he shared with our parents, even the way he offered to help me with my luggage. It all felt different. It was like the goofy kid I remembered had been replaced by this self-assured young man. I caught him looking at me a couple of times too, his gaze lingering for a moment longer than I expected, with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't anything overtly strange, just intense. Later that night I retreated to my old room. Mom had kept it exactly as I'd left it, down to the faded posters on the wall from my teenage years. A wave of nostalgia washed over me as I looked around. After a long, hot shower, I slipped into an oversized t-shirt and my favorite worn-out sweatpants and lay down on my old bed. The familiar scent of my lavender-scented sheets was comforting, and I intended to just rest for a moment before properly unpacking. But as I lay there in the quiet darkness, my thoughts kept drifting back to Lucas. I couldn't shake the image of the boy I remembered versus the young man he had become. I recalled his awkward attempts at flirting in middle school, his obsession with superhero movies, and the way he used to follow me around, always wanting to tag along. The contrast with the confident, almost handsome young man who had greeted me at the door was stark. There was a brief moment earlier when our hands had almost brushed as he helped me with my carry-on, and I'd felt a surprising little jolt. I tried to dismiss these thoughts as just the weirdness of adjusting back to family life after so long, but the more I tried to ignore it, the clearer his now more defined features became in my mind. The way his jawline had sharpened, the slight stubble he was sporting, the way his eyes seemed to hold a new depth. It was a confusing mix of warmth, a flicker of something akin to embarrassment, and a growing sense of curiosity that I couldn't quite explain. Just as I was finally starting to feel the edges of sleep pulling me under, I heard a soft, hesitant knock on my door. My heart skipped a beat. Who could that be? It was almost midnight. Then I heard his voice, soft and low from the other side. "Avery, you still awake?" I sat up in bed, a little startled. "Yeah, Luke, what's up?" The door creaked open slowly, and Lucas stood in the hallway, the dim light from the landing casting long shadows. He was wearing just a pair of basketball shorts, and I couldn't help but notice the definite change in his physique. Broader shoulders, more defined muscles in his arms. He looked a little uncertain, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Hey," he said quietly. "Sorry to bother you so late. I just couldn't really fall asleep. Thought maybe you were still awake and wanted to, talk for a bit. It feels like ages since we've actually connected." He hesitated, then asked, "Can I come in?" A little flustered by his unexpected presence and his lack of attire, I nodded and pulled the covers up a little higher. "Yeah, sure, come on in." I scooted over, making some space on the edge of the bed. Lucas stepped inside and sat down, a little shyly, fiddling with his phone in his hands and avoiding direct eye contact. We started by talking about the usual things, family updates, my work in Europe, and Lucas's senior year of high school. He told me about his college applications, his football season, and how much he was looking forward to graduation. It was all pretty normal, catching up stuff. But as we talked, I noticed he seemed a little preoccupied. His gaze would drift around the room, and he'd sometimes trail off mid-sentence, as if something more significant was weighing on his mind. He suddenly stopped scrolling through his phone and looked up at me, his voice a bit more serious. "Avery, do you ever think that when people who used to be really close grow up and go their separate ways for a long time, they can become almost like strangers to each other?" I paused, considering his question and trying to read between the lines. "It's definitely possible for people to change, Lucas," I replied thoughtfully. "Life experiences shape us. But I think if the foundation of your relationship was strong, that underlying connection is always there. It might just take some time to rediscover it." Lucas gave a small, almost melancholic smile. We sat there in the dim light filtering from the hallway, the atmosphere in the room feeling subtly different. I was acutely aware of his presence beside me, the faint scent of his aftershave, and the quiet rhythm of his breathing. There was an underlying awkwardness, but also something else, a strange kind of energy that I couldn't quite put my finger on. "Is everything okay, Lucas?" I asked gently. "You seem a little off." He hesitated for a moment, then shook his head slightly. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking, I guess." He looked up, a small smile playing on his lips. "Remember that time we tried to build a fort in the living room using all the blankets and pillows, and Mom got absolutely furious?" A wave of warmth washed over me as the memory surfaced. "Oh my God, yes," I laughed. "And then Dad came home and just stepped right over the whole thing like it was perfectly normal." The shared memory broke some of the tension, and we both chuckled, reminiscing about our childhood antics. After a while, Lucas stood up and stretched, his t-shirt riding up slightly and giving me a brief glimpse of his toned stomach. I quickly looked away, a little flustered. "Well," he said, yawning, "I should probably try to get some actual sleep. Thanks for talking, Avery." He gave me a quick, almost shy smile. "Good night." "Good night, Luke," I replied. As he left and closed the door behind him, I was left with a lingering sense of unease. The brief connection over our childhood memory was nice, but I still felt like there was something he wasn't saying, something that hung in the air between us. Later, I found myself wide awake, my mind racing. I got out of bed and decided to head downstairs for a glass of water, hoping it would help me relax. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw the warm glow of the television screen in the living room. I peeked in and saw Lucas sprawled on the sofa, his eyes glued to the screen, but his brow furrowed in thought. He looked, almost troubled. I quietly entered the living room. "Couldn't sleep either?" I asked softly. Lucas jumped slightly, then turned to me, a hint of embarrassment on his face. He quickly grabbed the remote and paused the show. "Hey, yeah, just restless." He sat up a little, pulling a throw blanket over his legs. I sat down on the armchair across from the sofa, keeping a comfortable distance. "What's wrong, Luke? You've seemed a little on edge since I arrived." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's just weird having you back, you know, in a good way, obviously, but it's like so much time has passed. You're different. I'm different." He trailed off, unable to articulate his feelings fully. I nodded in understanding. "I get it. It feels a little strange for me, too. You've grown up so much, Lucas. It's like I blinked, and suddenly you're this adult." I smiled warmly at him. Lucas looked at me, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "Well, you haven't changed much, Avery. Still as cool as I remember." He caught himself slightly, a hint of pink creeping into his cheeks. He quickly looked back at the paused TV screen. A brief, slightly charged silence hung in the air. Then Lucas shifted uncomfortably on the sofa and asked, his voice low, "Avery, can I ask you something kind of personal?" My heart skipped a beat. I nodded slowly, a sense of nervous anticipation building within me. "Yeah, sure, what's up?" Lucas hesitated, his gaze flicking down to his hands for a moment before he finally met my eyes. There was a vulnerability in his expression that I hadn't seen before. "It's just, when you were gone, things here were different. And now that you're back, it's like I feel things I haven't really felt before." He struggled to find the right words, his brow furrowed in thought, his voice barely above a whisper. His gaze held a mix of confusion and something that looked a lot like longing. A wave of heat rose to my cheeks. Lucas's words were vague, but a knot tightened in my stomach. I had a sinking feeling I understood the underlying meaning, and it made me deeply uncomfortable. Yet a strange, unsettling curiosity also flickered within me. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the image of my goofy little brother with the young man sitting before me, expressing these complicated, unfamiliar feelings. I tried to keep my voice even, hoping I wouldn't betray the sudden nervousness that had gripped me. "What kind of things, Lucas?" Lucas looked at me intently, his gaze lingering a moment too long, making my skin prickle with a strange mix of discomfort and a surprising, almost forbidden thrill. He then looked away quickly, running a hand through his hair again, a gesture I'd noticed he did when he was flustered. "It's hard to explain. It's just seeing you again. After so long, you're really beautiful, Avery. And it's like I never really noticed it before." The air in the living room thickened with unspoken tension. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know how to respond. Oh, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, shock, a strange sense of flattery, and a growing, undeniable awareness of the inappropriate nature of his feelings. It was like a line had been crossed, a line I didn't even realize was there until this moment. Lucas stood up abruptly and walked over to the window, his back to me. He stood there for a moment, his shoulders slightly hunched, and I could see him take a deep breath. After a moment, he turned back, his eyes filled with a raw vulnerability that tugged at something within me. He took a few slow steps towards me, closing the distance between the armchair and the sofa. He stopped just a few feet away, his gaze fixed on mine. I could feel the intensity of his stare, a silent question hanging in the air. He reached out a hand, as if to touch me, his fingers hovering in the space between us. Then he hesitated, his hand dropping back to his side. A wave of panic mixed with an undeniable physical awareness of my brother as a young man washed over me. I instinctively stood up, my movements feeling jerky and unnatural, and took a small step back, creating more space between us. The warmth radiating from him had felt too close. My voice was soft but firm, a clear boundary I needed to establish. "Lucas, you're my brother. What you're saying, it's not right." Lucas's expression fell, the vulnerability replaced by a look of pain and confusion. I know it's not right," he said, his voice low and strained. "But I can't help how I feel. It's like being around you again. It's stirring up all these confusing feelings. I miss you, Avery. Not just as a sister. I miss this." He gestured vaguely between us, a gesture that felt heavy with unspoken desires. Tears welled up in Lucas's eyes, and his voice cracked with emotion. "I know it's wrong, but sometimes, when you laugh or when you're just sitting there, I just want to hold you." He looked down at the floor, shame etched on his face. My heart ached for him. I saw the genuine pain and confusion in his eyes, the struggle he was clearly going through. Part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort him, to tell him it would be okay. But another, more rational part of me was deeply disturbed by the nature of his feelings, by the implications of what he was saying. This wasn't just sibling affection. This was something else entirely. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my own racing heart. "Lucas, I love you. You're my little brother, and you always will be. But what you're feeling, it's not the kind of feeling siblings should have for each other. We're family, and that's a really special bond that we need to protect." My voice was firm, but I tried to keep it gentle, knowing he was hurting. Lucas nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the floor. "I know. I'm sorry, Avery. I shouldn't have said anything." He turned abruptly and walked quickly out of the living room, his footsteps heavy as he headed upstairs, leaving me standing there in the dimly lit room, my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of his confession settling heavily in the silence. The air still felt charged, thick with the unspoken desires and the firm boundary I had just drawn. I stood in the living room for a long moment after Lucas left, the silence amplifying the turmoil within me. His words hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. I felt a mix of sadness for him, concern about what this meant for our relationship, and a lingering sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake off. Sleep was even more elusive that night. Lucas's confession replayed in my mind, each word echoing with a weight I hadn't anticipated. I tossed and turned, wondering how we would navigate this new, complicated dynamic. Would things ever go back to the way they were? The next morning, the atmosphere in the house was noticeably different. There was a quiet tension in the air, a palpable awkwardness whenever Lucas and I were in the same room. He was polite, offering me coffee and making small talk with our parents, but he avoided direct eye contact with me, and there was a stiffness in his demeanor that hadn't been there before. Later that morning, after our parents had gone out to run errands, I found Lucas in the backyard, shooting hoops with a focused intensity. I walked over and sat on the patio steps, watching him for a while. The rhythmic thump of the basketball against the backboard was the only sound for a few comfortable moments. Finally, I broke the silence. "Lucas, about last night." He stopped dribbling the ball, holding it in his hands, and turned to look at me, his expression contrite. "I'm really sorry, Avery. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I know it was wrong of me to say those things." I nodded, appreciating his honesty. "I know you didn't mean to, Lucas, but it's important that we both understand that those kinds of feelings between us, they're not okay. We're family, and that's a really special bond that we need to protect." Lucas sighed, then nodded again, looking more at ease this time. You're right. It's just, I guess I got confused. Being away for so long and seeing you again, I don't know. It won't happen again, Avery. I promise. His voice was sincere, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I smiled reassuringly. I know it won't, Lucas, and I appreciate you saying that. We've always been close, and I want us to continue to be close, as brother and sister. Over the next few days, things slowly started to return to a semblance of normalcy. Lucas was still a little quieter around me, but he was also making a conscious effort to interact with me in a more brotherly way, teasing me about my European adventures and even asking for my opinion on which college he should choose. It wasn't perfect, and I could still sense a slight undercurrent of awkwardness, but it felt like we were both trying. Soon my visit came to an end, and it was time for me to return to Europe. As I packed my bags, there was a sense of closure, but also a quiet understanding between Lucas and me. When it was time to say goodbye, we shared a genuine hug. It wasn't the same as the first hug I'd received, but it felt right. A hug between siblings who had navigated a difficult situation and reaffirmed their bond. I felt a sense of relief that we had been able to address the issue, even though it was uncomfortable, and that we were both committed to maintaining our relationship as brother and sister. On my long flight back, I had plenty of time to reflect on the experience. I realized that growing up can bring about unexpected and sometimes confusing emotions, and that family dynamics can shift in ways you don't anticipate. I was grateful that Lucas and I had been able to talk, even though it was difficult, and that we had both chosen to prioritize our familial bond. I understood that setting boundaries, even with the people you love most, is a crucial part of maintaining healthy and respectful relationships. Looking back, I learned a valuable lesson about the complexities of human emotions and the importance of navigating them with care and honesty. Sometimes strong feelings can arise in unexpected places, especially when time and distance create a sense of unfamiliarity. But ultimately, it's our actions and the choices we make that define our relationships. Choosing to honor the established boundaries and prioritize the well-being of those we love is paramount. So if you ever find yourself caught in a web of confusing emotions, especially with someone you're close to, remember that open and honest communication is key. It might be uncomfortable, but it's the first step towards understanding and resolution. And always remember the importance of setting healthy boundaries, even when it's hard. It's not about pushing people away, but about protecting the integrity and respect within your relationships. Thank you for listening to my story. It was a strange and unexpected few days back home, but ultimately, I believe it brought Lucas and me to a new level of understanding and respect for each other. If you found this story meaningful, please leave a like and maybe share your own experiences in the comments. I'll see you in the next video, and I wish you all happiness and good health.